Hi, my name is Jazno Francoeur. I'm a professor here at the DigiPen Institute of Technology. If you tuned in to my last mini lesson on visual effects, we began to talk about avalanches and we were doing an example on the whiteboard. Now we're going to move into working on a table and thinking about not just a static image, but thinking about the image in motion. So let's get started. So continuing what we were doing up earlier, we're just talking about force, right? And we were thinking about silhouette. Now, one of the reasons I animate with a Sharpie is because it forces you to not be precious. You can't erase. And this was a decision I made at Disney years ago on Lilo and Stitch because we needed to get footage out very quickly. And it doesn't matter if it's a rough. In fact, it almost gives the line more liveliness and if it's more gestural if it's rough. And of course, naturally, you would need to clean it up on a separate level. As I said earlier when we were looking at the whiteboard, this is actually enough for an animation key to sell the idea. So let's just say that would be number one. Now, we're not going to animate it every frame. So typically, I would animate on what's called 4s or 8s. So we're animating 24 frames per second. So again, we're just following the arcs. It'd be no different than if we were doing a bouncing ball. But in this case, we cannot defy the laws of physics. So we have to keep Newton in mind. There's a little bit of relativity as well because we have to think about how drawings behave when they come forward in space, in visual space. So they're going to move quicker when they come toward camera. They're going to be slower when they're further away. So again, at this point, we're just really getting the essence of this, getting the essence of the avalanche. We're not getting too precious. We're just thinking about that outer silhouette for the most part. And then I'm going to do another pass where we think about the inner silhouette a little bit more. And I'm avoiding twinning, so I'm having some areas that are going faster than others. And that way we don't have the exact same silhouette. These shapes are always evolving. So by the time we get to the next drawing, we're already thinking that we're hitting the edge of that slope. That means it's already going to, you can almost think of these as like mini explosions. Now everything is beginning to come both at us and away, but it's hitting the surface. And this very important point that no matter what we animate, we always have to be thinking about perspective. So in this case, I'm thinking the perspective is roughly somewhere around here, right? So even though I don't have this down, this in my mind is where I'm imagining the animation going. So again, I'm just thinking very gesturally at this point. And of course, this just continues to come down. This is what we call flipping order. Luckily, I have a light table, so I actually see completely through this. One of the things I love about this type of work is the inherent abstraction of it, but it's also specific in a weird way too. It's oddly specific, but shapes are always evolving with elemental effects. So again, this is just a gesture. We're going to do just a few more frames, then I'll do a pass where we'll tie this down just a little bit more. As I said, things that come toward camera are going to happen the fastest. There's a lot of similarity in shape language with water, as I'd mentioned before, but also with smoke. And of course, here's a little animator's trick. It took me many years to wheedle this out of one of our animators. Of course, the fear is always that if they share too much information, that one day you'll take their job. I say, one should never hoard information. One should always share and never be fearful of sharing that information. I spent many, many years cataloging and putting together a lot of the work from a lot of the masters at Disney. I was very fortunate to work with a lot of these individuals. We always say we stand on the shoulders of giants, and in my case, that's absolutely the case. I would have had a career without all the wonderful information from these other fantastic lifers, people who've been doing this animation much of their life. All right, so we have maybe some new shapes coming here, but for the most part we're just keeping it really loose because remember, this is a gesture. Think of it, as I had mentioned before, about drawing the human figure. How much of the essence of a figure can you express in 1 minute? All right, so let's just say that we're going to stop right here, and then notice that I've been almost like my range of motion is this. Now I'm going to switch to this range of motion, and now I can begin to design and to carve out the shapes. The animator trick here, we're always looking at a system of opposites. So notice there was a little bit of convexity, and now there's concavity here. So it's a system of opposites. I'm pushing this direction. The eye is always looking for contrast, always trying to avoid twinning, always trying to avoid anything that might be tantamount to bilateral symmetry. Now this is not necessarily a beauty path, but it's one in which we're beginning to define a little bit more what are these shapes and what are their respective paths, where are they going. So in terms of line hierarchy, we want to show that there's distance, that this is definitely closer to camera and this is a little further away. And as I also said, we can now think about what is this inner silhouette? What is the shape that also begins to define the topography and the volume of this avalanche? Now this could be anything. It could be fire, it could be smoke, it could be water. It's going to be the same process. We always start with the gesture, and developing these inner shapes is just as critical as the exterior silhouette, in my opinion. It becomes very important. You always have big, medium, small shapes. So this would be our big shape here. This would be our smaller shape, and this would be our smallest shape.